Welcome into One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. I'm John Barry, and we are back today with another college football video. Let's get into it. Before we get started, I'm trying to hit 300 subscribers before the end of the college football season, and it is winding down. I'm running out of time, so I need your guys' help to get there. So if you're enjoying the content, if you enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Any support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, we can get into the video. Speaking of the college football season winding down, that's kind of why today's video is being made. I want to talk about what are the most important games left, as we only have 2 weeks left of the regular season, and what are the most important teams. Now, this isn't necessarily the best or the biggest games left, and it's not necessarily the best teams, but it's which games are going to be most crucial in shaping the playoff bracket, and same for the teams. And we can get started on the team side. We get started on the game side. I'll do the teams at the end of the video, but first I want to talk about the biggest games left. I have one this week and then 3 from rivalry weekend. In the one this week, we talked about it in the prediction video. It is USC at Oregon. So yeah, on Tuesday, I broke down the game, who I thought would win, but I feel like I didn't do a good enough job talking about just how important this game is, as I think it's kind of a de facto playoff game in its own right. I think the loser of this game is probably going to miss the playoff, and the winner is probably to go, probably getting it. And I say probably because it's not a guarantee. Look, if USC beats Oregon and loses to UCLA, they're out. But if they're good enough to go on the road to beat Oregon, I'm assuming they're also going to beat UCLA. And then at that point, for all we know, they're in the Big Ten championship. But at the very least, a 10-2 USC, whose only losses are on the road to Illinois, on the road to Notre Dame, and has wins over Michigan, over Oregon. Like, that team is making the college football playoff. And then Oregon, if they lose to USC and then beats Washington at 10-2, they could still be in, but I just think it's going to be dicey. When you see, like, Oklahoma would probably be ahead of them if they went out. Alabama could still be in. Notre Dame would move ahead of them. The chances of getting to Big 12 teams, like a BYU and a Texas Tech, if BYU only has the 2 losses, but one of them's in the conference championship game, like, I think we could see quickly how Oregon could slip and miss out. And that's before we even got into talking about, like, Miami or Vanderbilt. Like, there's lots of teams on the bubble, Utah. So Oregon, I think, kind of has to win this game, especially when, if you evaluate their resume at the end of the year, and we're looking at 2 losses, both at home to Indiana and USC, even though they would likely be playoff teams, it's still a very bad look. So I think it's just so critical for both these teams to win this game, and that's why it is the first game I want to mention as the biggest games left on the schedule. Now, all the remaining games we have left are rivalry games on rivalry weekend, and the first one I want to talk about is Vanderbilt, Tennessee. And this one is not necessarily the one I think a lot of people are going to think of, because I think people have Vanderbilt in just the back of their head kind of forgotten about when it comes to the playoff race. But assuming Vanderbilt wins at home against Kentucky this week, they will be traveling to Neyland Stadium in Knoxville to face their rival Tennessee, who's likely going to be ranked by the committee. Now, I ranked them 25 in my rankings. The committee is going to have them higher. They've had them higher every week than I've had them. So the committee views them as that would be a really good win for Vanderbilt. And now if we're looking at a 10-2 team, could Vanderbilt be in the playoff? It'll be really interesting to see where the committee ranks them not to when I'm filming this, it's tonight, hasn't come out yet, but when this video comes out, you guys already know what the rankings look like. But I'm really interested to see, does Texas drop below Vanderbilt? Because the committee seems to just selectively choose when head-to-head matters versus when it doesn't. Like, so if Texas Tech is still ahead of Vanderbilt despite more losses because they cite head-to-head, I'll be very confused when Miami has the same record as Notre Dame, but head-to-head doesn't matter there. So I expect Vanderbilt will be ahead of Texas, but I'm very curious to see. And at that point, if they go 10-2 in the SEC with a win against Tennessee to end the season, and they have a win against Missouri, who may be ranked, may not be ranked, evaluating the whole body of work, they'll be right there with teams like maybe it's a Miami, maybe it's a Utah. Like, they'll be right in the mix for those last playoff spots. So getting a huge win at Tennessee could be the difference in Vanderbilt getting a playoff spot versus one of the teams that's ahead of them right now getting in. So that is why that game, I think, is one of the 4 biggest left on the schedule. But these next 2 are even bigger. And the first one is going to be the Iron Bowl. Alabama traveling to Jordan-Hare to take on Auburn. And at first glance, it's like, well, Alabama should clearly win this game. Alabama's been one of the best teams. Auburn's had a disastrous year. The coach was fired. But we've seen not only Kalen DeBoer lose as a big favorite. I mean, just last week he was nearly a double-digit favorite and lost. South Carolina took him down to the wire. Florida State beat Alabama. We don't need to go back to last year to see Vanderbilt and Oklahoma beating them as major underdogs. So don't, Alabama's proven they can lose as a big favorite. And this is the Iron Bowl. This is Auburn in Jordan-Hare. If we're ruling out an Auburn upset, I think you're crazy. I've seen too many times Alabama go into that building and just fall apart, look like they're versing a completely different Auburn team than we've seen the rest of the year. We see that in rivalry games all the time. You get these maximized effort because of maximized emotion, giving all you have left to this one game at the end of the season to prove you could save your whole season. As much as Auburn's been a disaster this year, had playoff expectations, may miss a bowl game, coaches fired, all of that can be saved. The fans will be happy if you beat Alabama. So you are getting Auburn's absolute peak performance. And for Alabama, you have everything on the line. If you lose to Auburn, you will go from looking like top four, looking like a bye, favorite to win the SEC title, to in just 3 weeks, if you lose to Oklahoma, lose to Auburn, you are out of the college football playoff, you're out of the SEC title race, all of that. You are missing everything. So this season could crash and burn for Alabama in the Auburn game, and that's why it's so critical, because if Alabama's out, obviously that opens up another at-large spot. But if Alabama wins, it's also very interesting because we probably get a three-way tie between Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, maybe even a four-way tie if Texas A&M loses to Texas, and then we're seeing all these tiebreaker scenarios. Who's going to the SEC title game? And I think the most likely one we're to get is Alabama A&M, because I think A&M beats Texas. If A&M loses, we're likely to get Alabama, Georgia. And at that point, if Alabama then wins the SEC, now it's like, okay, a two-loss Alabama who lost to Oklahoma, Florida State, but they're SEC champions. How high do they move up? If they beat A&M, do they jump them? If they beat Georgia, is Alabama getting a bye? So they could completely shake off the structure of the SEC, who's getting first-round byes, who's not. It all hinges on the Iron Bowl. It is almost the most pivotal game left this season, but not quite number one. And that is because the game is the biggest game left of the college football season. It's the biggest rivalry in all of college football. It's the best rivalry if you ask me. It is Michigan, Ohio State, and this is critical in so many ways, because if Michigan, for the fifth straight year, upsets, well, I don't know if they've all been upsets, but I think they have all been upsets. This would be not the biggest upset because, last year happened, but it would be the second biggest. If they do it again, beat Ohio State for a fifth year in a row, you can't leave out a 10-2 Michigan, whose losses are to Oklahoma and USC, but has beaten Ohio State, which would be the best win anybody has in all of college football. You can't leave them out. And they also probably won't be, but could be going to the Big Ten championship. There's a slim chance of that still happening because I think if Oregon wins out, I think Oregon has tiebreakers over Michigan. And if Oregon doesn't win out, then it's because USC probably won out and then USC has tiebreakers. So Michigan's probably not going to the Big Ten title, but it doesn't matter. That 10-2 Michigan team, you can't leave them out. And then we're seeing Ohio State still in, Indiana still in, Oregon or USC, like we talked about, is going to be in, and Michigan would be in. So you get a fourth Big Ten team, which means someone on the bubble is out. So this is kind of a bid thief scenario for the Wolverines, which actually be huge and is obviously very important. But I also think the Ohio State side is underrated because we would once again get all the talks about Ryan Day and he can't beat Michigan, all that, right? We've grown kind of accustomed to it the past few years in college football. But if Ohio State wins, right? Obviously, Michigan would miss the playoff, not much, and the bracket would change. But if Ohio State wins and then wins the Big Ten championship, we look at them as kind of this apex team in college football. Even though I've ranked Indiana above them in my rankings, that's a resume thing. It's not an eye test thing. Right now, I think Ohio State looks like clearly the best team when I watch them. And we would go into the college football playoff with a heavy favorite. But if Michigan wins and Ohio State has been taken down, nobody looks at Indiana as a juggernaut. At least I don't think they do. And certainly no one's looking at Texas A&M as a juggernaut, and they may not even finish undefeated, having to play Texas, having to play the SEC championship game to end the year. So we would go in looking like, okay, Indiana could win it, sure. A&M could win it, but Ohio State may still be the favorite. Georgia, Oregon, Notre Dame. We would have so many teams in a truly wide open playoff, something different than I think we saw even last year, because Oregon was kind of a heavy favorite and we knew they got a tough draw with Ohio State. But this year it'd be truly anyone's to win if Michigan wins that game versus if Ohio State wins it. It's going to be thought of as their title to lose. So Michigan can not only shake off shake up the bubble of the college football playoff, but also just shake up the expectations and talk going into it about who can really win this thing. Because at that point, can you even rule out Michigan if they were good enough to beat Ohio State? So things could get really crazy depending on the outcome of this game. And of course, after this week, we will be predicting it. We'll be predicting all these games, actually. If you're on this list, you're going to get a breakdown on the channel. With that being said, though, let's transition to the most interesting or most important teams left and to follow this college football season. And I want to start with Cincinnati. So they're not like, I don't think a lot of people are like, oh, what's Cincinnati up to? Like, oh yeah, they're certainly very interesting. It's not like that. But when you look at the Big 12, Cincinnati is the key piece in shaking up the entire conference because they host BYU this weekend. They're 1.5 point underdogs. So you would say kind of a coin toss game. And the difference in Cincinnati winning that game versus losing that game is drastic. If they win, they have 2 losses. BYU has 2 losses. Utah has 2 losses, all in a round robin 3-way tie. That's before we even get into the fact that ASU has 2 losses. And I'm forgetting one more. Houston has 2 losses. So you would have 5 2-loss Big 12 teams potentially going into the final week, which would make this final race crazy because then like ASU still has U of A. They could fall out of it. TCU plays Cincinnati. Cincinnati could then fall back out of it. But if they don't, and say ignore the ASU Houston side for a second, like just this 3-way tie of Utah, Cincinnati, BYU, that could somehow end up with Utah back in the Big 12 title picture, and then BYU's now at home, Utah's surpassed them, or Cincinnati wins the tiebreaker. They get to play Texas Tech for a chance to get into the playoff. And now the Big 12's a 2-bid league instead of a 1-bid league, which again obviously means 1 less at-large bid. So Cincinnati has the chance to be a bid thief here, completely shake up the Big 12 picture, or alternatively, they could make the Big 12 only get 1 team. If you beat BYU and then you lose, so now everyone's 2 losses and Texas Tech wins the Big 12 championship, now you've guaranteed the Big 12 only gets 1 spot. So they kind of work in both ways. They could potentially seal or guarantee the Big 12 getting 2 spots. They could also ruin any chance by beating BYU and then not winning the conference title. So Cincinnati certainly one to follow here these final 2 weeks. Next up, 2 teams I want to talk about together actually because they're both in the ACC and they both play this week, and it's Georgia Tech and Pitt. So initially I was going to say just that game. I was going to put it on the games list. But then when you look at it, what Pitt has after that, what Georgia Tech has after that, I think they're really both just crucial teams to follow. And I'll start at the Pitt side because of how much they control the ACC picture. So there's a couple possibilities here. One, they could just lose to Georgia Tech, lose to Miami. They cause no chaos, right? But say they lose to Georgia Tech, beat Miami. Now they've eliminated Miami. So you've taken Miami off the table. You've guaranteed the ACC 1 big league, or maybe not guaranteed, but certainly played a large part in that being the likeliest outcome. So you can ruin Miami's season. You could cause no chaos. But what about the other couple scenarios? You beat Georgia Tech, lose to Miami. You've virtually done the same thing, except you've shaken up the ACC playoff race because Georgia Tech would have 2 losses. Miami would have 2 losses. Virginia, if they beat Virginia Tech, would still be in. We'd have to see what SMU did, but you've potentially brought life to Miami or Louisville. Like all these 2-loss teams are back in it if you beat Georgia Tech, and who knows how all those tiebreakers would play out. I'd have to look through a list of those and see who's even involved in those scenarios, but you can completely shake up, the ACC title race. And then the last scenario is, of course, Pitt wins out, goes to the ACC title game and wins, in which case they're in the playoff. The ACC is definitely a 1 big league. And you probably have some people even arguing that like James Madison and North Texas should be ahead of Pitt. But if Pitt rolls out beating Georgia Tech, beating Miami, and then wins the ACC title, they'll be in the college football playoff. But so Pitt has just such a wide range of outcomes where you could just ruin Miami's season, ruin the ACC, guarantee the ACC gets 2 bids, somehow sneak into the playoff yourself. Like Pitt is an absolute wild card to watch down the stretch here. And then Georgia Tech, it really comes down to this Georgia game, because if you beat Pitt, you're in the ACC title, and you could still lose to Georgia and make the playoff by winning the ACC championship. But what if you beat Georgia? What if Georgia Tech and Haynes King beat Pitt, beat Georgia, and are sitting there 11-1 playing, call it Virginia in the ACC title? Say they lose that game. Chandler Morris has a big day. Virginia beats them 34-31, walk-off field goal, right? Really tight game. Is an 11-1 Georgia Tech that just beat Georgia, who the committee's probably going to have number 4, I would imagine. Like I said, rankings haven't come out, but I imagine they're a top 4 seed at this time. If Georgia Tech beats Georgia sitting at 11-1 to end the season, and then loses a walkout field goal to Virginia in the ACC title, like Georgia Tech is still making the playoff. Virginia is making the playoff. The ACC is getting 2 teams in, and once again, someone on the bubble has to get cut. One of these at-larges has to get cut, whether that is you're looking at a 10-2 Oklahoma or a 10-2, maybe it's an ACC team in Miami, maybe it's 10-2 BYU or 11-2 BYU, maybe it would be 10-2 Utah. You get the point. Like all these teams that think they have a chance on the bubble, maybe it's a 10-2 Oregon. Somebody is getting cut if Georgia Tech beats Georgia and then doesn't win the ACC title, which makes them one of my top teams to watch. And now finally, I want to talk about Oklahoma. Because with Oklahoma beating Alabama, they became a heavy favorite to make the college football playoff. I'm assuming they're going to be ranked, I would think 8th. I have them 9th in my ranking, but I have them behind BYU. I think the committee will rank them ahead of BYU. You guys, for the 3rd time I mentioned, you already know where they're ranked, but they become a heavy favorite to make the college football playoff because you have a home game against Missouri and then you have a home game against LSU. But neither of these games are complete freebies. It's not like Oklahoma's out here like Ole Miss scheduling the Citadel or Kennesaw State or actually Kennesaw State's not bad, but any of these really bad teams, the little sisters of the poor type that some of these SEC schools get at the end of the year. Oklahoma, after a huge win going on the road to beat Alabama, the emotional win, it's like your season is saved, you're in the playoff conversation, all this hype. Now it's at home, but you have to play a very good Missouri team. I know they're playing a 3rd-string quarterback, but what Ahmad Hardy did showed Missouri can win just running the ball. Over 300 yards rushing last week, and that defense is very good. The pass rush is elite, and Oklahoma has been somewhat reliant on turnovers. So there's no guarantee you're beating Missouri. And LSU, look, to end the season, they're a very talented team. The defense is still really good, and if they're healthy, if Weeks is there, that defense has been elite at times this year. And for an Oklahoma offense that can't run the ball and has a quarterback in John Mateer that hasn't been a star since the injury, any game where they're playing a good defense, they could lose the turnover battle, and in a low-scoring defensive game, could lose the game. So Oklahoma, while right now looks safe to make the playoff picture and is taking up a spot, I think could easily falter one of these final 2 games, end up opening up a playoff spot, and obviously that's what makes them on this list. And I think because they play 2, they're not easy games, but they're not the hardest games. 2 very middling teams in the SEC, because I know Missouri might be ranked. I think the AP ranked them, but as a 3rd-string quarterback, they're just slightly above average. LSU probably slightly below average. You should win both those games. You should be a playoff team, and at that point you're probably hosting a playoff game, I would think, if you went out at 10-2. So it's the difference between having to travel to Norman, Oklahoma, versus Oklahoma falling out entirely, and one of these teams we've mentioned countless times on the bubble, the Miamis of the world, the Utahs, the 10-2 Oregons or Michigans or USCs, any of those teams, one more would get in this scenario if Oklahoma is to drop a game. All right, so with that being said, those are my 4 most important games to end the year and my 4 most important teams to follow to end the year. Let me know, is there anyone or any game you think I left out? Comment it down below. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I will be back here, as always, Sunday with a reaction to this weekend's games. And until then, I'll see you guys next time.